On the 43rd floor of Halden Media Tower, Mira Patel's headset beeped as she forced a customer service smile that never touched her eyes. She was 28. Her skin tired, her spirit muted beneath harsh white light. The office thrummed with status updates, keystrokes, and shallow laughter. She floated through it, unseen, unnecessary. At 3:47 p.m., her terminal froze mid-call. Error windows stacked like dominoes. Then, a new pop-up blinked once. Mira Patel, your karma has been triggered. She stared. Her hand hovered over the mouse, breath caught. Another line followed. Correction begins now. Around her, everything stopped. Literally. The office froze in motion. The coffee pour. The turning head. A phone hung mid-air. Mira stood. The fluorescent lights buzzed louder. She turned slowly, whispering, "What the hell is this?" But the air swallowed the words. Her monitor blinked again, glowing. Observe. Learn. Undo. She reached for the screen, but her hand never made contact. The air rippled, swallowing her in soundless light. She dropped. No scream, just gravity. When she landed, she was barefoot in her childhood apartment. The exact living room. Same threadbare sofa, same smell of curry and antiseptic. She stared. Time hadn't moved. This was the night her father collapsed. On the couch, teenage Mira scrawled job applications on her school notebooks, unaware. Her father coughed violently in the background, hand pressed to his side. A knot formed in Mira's chest. She stepped forward, whispering, "I should have seen it." The clock ticked once, then stopped. The past wouldn't change, but karma made sure she faced what she'd chosen to forget. Younger Mira crossed the room, stepping over bills strewn across the floor. "If I just get this interview," she said to herself. Mira remembered every word. She remembered how she buried the worry, never asked if her father had seen a doctor. "It was easier to pretend he was strong," she whispered. Karma didn't argue. It simply replayed. The version of her in the room lifted her father's blanket and pressed a cool cloth to his forehead. The real Mira winced. "I was already learning to survive, not to care." A new message appeared in midair, hovering near the window. "Survival is not absolution." Mira's hands curled into fists. This wasn't a punishment. It was an education. The living room faded. Now she stood in a hospital corridor, her reflection flickering in the floor tiles. Cold. Sterile. Across the hallway, a doctor spoke with her mother, who held a wrinkled note. Mira remembered this because she wasn't there. She had ignored the call, chased a client pitch. Her mother had cried alone. Mira backed up until her back hit the wall. "I told myself I couldn't afford to stop." A voice echoed back, her own. "Then why didn't you go afterward?" The corridor grew darker. The fluorescent lights buzzed louder. Karma wasn't subtle. It pulled grief from the bones and made you carry it until it was yours again. Suddenly, blackness. She was no longer in the hospital. She was floating in space, surrounded by hundreds of fragments, each a moment. Forgotten phone calls. Unsent messages. Missed birthdays. Her mother alone at a stove. Her father's final voicemail never played. One by one, the fragments circled faster. A light shone above her, and words fell like snowfall. "Intent doesn't erase impact." She screamed but made no sound. She reached out, touching one memory, and it burned. Karma didn't forgive. It invited you to change. And to do that, you had to watch it all. Mira wept in the silence, then whispered, "I'm still here." The fragments began to slow, then fade. The darkness pulsed once, then let her go. Light returned gradually, like breath. Mira opened her eyes to a different place. She stood in the lobby of Halden Media, her current job, but it was quieter, emptier, dreamlike. Across the room, an elevator opened. Inside stood Mira herself, but pristine, poised, smiling, polished heels, no eye bags. This version turned and said, "You still think I'm the problem?" Mira stepped forward. "You're the shell I became." The other Mira smiled wider. "No, I'm the version who didn't flinch, who got promoted, who buried the guilt deep enough to never feel it again." The elevator doors began to close. Mira didn't chase her. She turned away. Karma didn't want her to destroy the mask. It wanted her to recognize it and walk past. She blinked and found herself back at her desk, only different. The screen in front of her showed surveillance footage of her own days, answering calls, nodding through insults, typing while tears welled up. No sound, just loops of silent obedience. A message hovered above the screen. This was the cost. Mira stepped back. All her swallowed screams, all the times she said, "of course," when she meant no, played like surveillance from a prison. She turned to leave, and a door appeared where the cubicle wall had been. She walked through it. She didn't hesitate, because now she knew compliance didn't mean control. It meant erasure, and she was done vanishing. The door led to a rooftop. Wind howled. The skyline blurred like it was drawn in charcoal. Across the rooftop stood the people who had shaped her silence. Managers, mentors, exes. Not yelling, just watching. One by one, they said her name. Mira, Mira, Mira. Some voices warm, some cold. She stood in the center, head bowed, then lifted her gaze. "You don't get to write my ending," she said. One figure, her first boss, stepped forward, smug. "Then, who does?" Mira exhaled. "I do." The skyline behind her lit up. A new building stood tall, unfamiliar. Not past, not punishment. Possibility. Karma wasn't vengeance. It was agency, and she had just claimed it. Suddenly, the figures disappeared. The rooftop melted away. She was alone in a void, but not in darkness. In light. A notebook floated before her, glowing. Blank pages, dull. One for each choice still ahead. Her hands shook. A pen appeared beside it. No prompt. No message. Just this. What now? Mira hesitated. Then wrote one word. Begin. The moment the ink touched the page, the light rippled outward. The air shifted. The void pulsed like breath. She wasn't being tested anymore. She was being given the pen. Karma didn't offer edits. It offered authorship. And she was ready to write in her own handwriting. When she came to, Mira stood in a train station. Ordinary. Real. Way. A cup of coffee in her hand. The paper still warm. The sound of life around her again. But something had changed. She didn't feel like a character anymore. She felt like a person. She walked past her usual platform. Past the signs. Past the scripts. Onto a different track. One heading toward uncertainty. She sat by the window, phone off. No work calls. Just her. For the first time she felt the pull of her own life. Not one assigned. Not one defaulted. As the train moved forward, so did she. No prompts. No corrections. Just intention. The train arrived at a small, unfamiliar station. Mira stepped off into a town she didn't recognize. Not on any map. Streets cobbled, time slower. A community garden bloomed beside a cafe where no one looked at their phones. A chalkboard read, "Volunteer help wanted." Mira watched a woman carry boxes inside. She hesitated, then entered. Well, for the first time in years she offered help without a deadline. "Can I lift something?" she asked. The woman smiled. "Sure. We all lift something." The task wasn't difficult, but it felt sacred. Mira's shoulders ached in the best way. Not from weight, but from effort that meant something. Karma hadn't dropped her here by accident. It had introduced her to now. Days passed gently. Mira fell into rhythm, sweeping floors, labeling jam jars, learning people's names. She wasn't managing spreadsheets. She was planting basil, her hands dirtied with real life. One evening, while stacking tea boxes, a volunteer asked, "You used to do something else, didn't you?" Mira paused. Something loud, something hollow. They nodded. "You don't carry that noise anymore." That night, Mira walked the quiet street under lamplight and thought, "I'm not healed, but I'm not hiding either." Her steps weren't small, they were deliberate. No karma message flashed in the sky. No voice whispered direction, because now, her intuition was louder than any correction. In the back room of the cafe, Mira found a wall of post-it notes, each with a truth, confession, or dream. "I stayed too long. I forgave them anyway. I want peace." She added her own. "I almost disappeared." She stuck it high, above the others. That act, small, silent, felt bigger than any promotion. A regular entered behind her, saw the wall, and added a new one. Mira said nothing, but they nodded in understanding. This wasn't performance. This was permission. To say the unsaid. To be the unfinished. Karma didn't demand a perfect sentence. It asked for a beginning. And Mira, finally, had one. Mira sat outside the cafe on a bench, sipping tea. Across from her, a teenage girl sat sketching furiously in a notebook. The girl looked up and asked, "Do you ever feel like you're not the main character?" Mira sipped, then answered, "I used to think I wasn't even in the story." The girl blinked. "So what changed?" Mira smiled softly. "I started writing it." The girl nodded and returned to her sketching. Mira watched her, recognizing the ache of trying to exist in silence. But she didn't offer advice. Just presence. Sometimes healing didn't arrive as a breakthrough. Sometimes it came as a shared bench and an honest answer. The cafe closed early for the solstice. A bonfire crackled behind the shop, music playing low. Mira stood at the edge of the crowd, unsure. Then someone handed her a sparkler. "Tradition," they said. She lit it, watching it hiss and spark to life. Around her, people laughed, sang, danced. Mira didn't know the steps, but she stepped in anyway. Not to be seen, not to prove anything, just to feel it. Her body moved without apology. Karma hadn't brought her here to fix her. It had simply reminded her what it felt like to burn and not be consumed. Her smile was real, her arms open, her joy not owed but earned. The next morning, Mira walked to the cafe early. The streets were still damp from dawn fog, her footsteps the only sound. But outside the cafe, a man waited. Dark coat, no smile, clipboard in hand. Mira Patel. She nodded cautiously. "We've been watching your recovery." Her heart skipped. Not fear, recognition. Karma's emissary. "You were never meant to stay and pause," he said. "Only pass through." Mira frowned. "So, this was temporary?" The man didn't answer. Just offered a file. Inside, moments yet to happen, names she didn't know, places she hadn't seen. She asked, "Do I get to choose?" He replied, "You always did." And then he vanished. No wind, no warning, just gone. The file stayed unopened on her bed for hours. She stared at it while folding towels, making tea, helping customers. Every time she touched it, her hands tingled. Finally, after the shop closed, she sat on the floor and opened it. Photos fell out. People she didn't know. Scenarios. Probabilities. Top. Choices. Each one came with a timestamp and a ripple effect. Help here, and something blooms. Walk past, and something breaks. Mira whispered, "This is what karma meant by correction. Not a fix, a responsibility." She looked at the final page, her own photo. No timestamp, no outcome, Just one sentence. Guide, not ghost. She exhaled slowly. It was time to step forward. Mira traveled next without destination. Bus to train to borrowed car. She stopped when she felt it. People on the verge. In one town, she found a woman curled on a park bench, whispering apologies to no one. Mira sat beside her without speaking. In another, a boy stared blankly at an eviction notice. Mira bought him a sandwich, wrote a number on a napkin. She didn't explain why. She didn't stay to watch the outcome. The work wasn't about credit. It was about cause. Karma wasn't spectacle. It was seed. Mira walked on, unnoticed but deeply rooted. One by one, small lives shifted, and no one knew why. But Mira did. Some days were heavier. Not all pain accepted help. Not all cries wanted answers. Mira sat with a mother who had lost her daughter. She didn't speak. She simply held her hand. They watched the sun set together, neither blinking. The woman whispered, "You didn't save her." Mira replied, "I'm not here to erase, only to witness." The woman nodded. That was enough. Later, Mira cried in a motel room, alone. She missed the cafe. Missed Rena. Missed silence that didn't weigh so much. But she stayed, because pain wasn't an interruption. It was part of the page. And karma was still scripting. Weeks later, Mira returned to the cafe. The back garden had grown wild. Leo was taller. The wall of notes fuller. Rena hugged her and said, "You look older." Mira laughed. "I feel away." That night, she stood where the bonfire once burned. She pulled the final photo from the file, her own. She lit it. Not in mourning. In gratitude. The flame curled her image into smoke. Around her, laughter returned. Inside, music played. Mira turned back toward it. Toward life. Her karma wasn't a sentence anymore. It was a compass. And she was finally walking with it, not against it. Mira received a letter. No sender. No return address. Just her name, handwritten. Inside, a single sentence. Not all scripts are yours to edit. And a location. Belwick Prison. She hadn't thought of her brother in years. Too much shame. Too much silence. But now karma nudged her again, quiet but firm. She traveled without excuse, without comfort. When she arrived, the officer at the front desk raised an eyebrow. "Family?" Mira nodded. "Not sure. I'm here to find out." They led her down cold corridors, past heavy doors, past old anger. She wasn't sure what she'd say, only that this wasn't about him. This was about her, choosing presence over punishment. Hot. He looked older, thinner, eyes duller, but still her brother. He looked up, stunned. "I didn't think you'd ever." She sat across from him. "I almost didn't." Silence hovered, thick with years. "Why now?" he asked. Mira replied, "Because I stopped waiting for the right version of the past." He blinked. "I'm not sorry for everything." "I'm not here for that," she said. "I'm here because pretending you didn't exist hurt more than remembering who you were." He looked away. Mira didn't reach across the glass. She didn't cry. She just stayed. Sometimes karma isn't dramatic. Sometimes it's simply not walking away this time. They met twice more. No forgiveness. No breakthroughs. Just human moments. The second time he asked, "Are you still running?" Mira answered, "I'm walking now." He smiled. "That sounds exhausting." She nodded. "But it's mine." Before she left, she handed him a photo. One from the cafe wall. No caption. Just truth. "I almost disappeared," it read. He turned it over. "Blank. You." Mira said, "It doesn't need explanation." He tucked it into his shirt pocket without comment. As she walked out, she felt no release. No relief. Just a clean page where a wound had been. Karma hadn't closed the chapter. She had. Back at the cafe, Mira found Leo outside, reading a book beneath the garden's oak tree. He looked up and said, "Did you fix it?" She shook her head. "No, I faced it." He nodded. "That's harder." She sat beside him. The breeze stirred the leaves, light dappling her face. "Do you think it ends?" she asked. "The trials?" Leo thought for a moment. "I think karma just changes form. When you're ready, it stops testing and starts trusting." Mira smiled. She didn't know when Leo had become so wise. Maybe because someone had stayed. That night she added a new post-it to the wall. "Healing isn't quiet. It just doesn't beg." News came the next day. Alden Media was being investigated. Corruption, coercion, lawsuits pending. The woman who replaced Mira was named in the headlines. People whispered, "Did you know?" Mira only shrugged. She didn't feel vindicated, just informed. Justice wasn't hers to orchestrate. But karma didn't forget. That evening, she stood in front of her old office building. Just stood. No speech. No gloating. She looked up at the mirrored glass that once made her feel small. And she whispered, "Thank you for the breakroom panic attacks. The quiet rage, the awakening." Then she turned and walked. Not away, but onward. Rain fell softly as Mira stood at the edge of a cliff overlooking Doran Bay. It wasn't on any map, not the kind most people read. But her file had listed it. A place marked only with the word, pause. So she did. She sat on the wet stone, let the ocean air tangle her hair, and felt her pulse slow. No one waited for her. No task demanded her attention. It was strange, freedom, with no punishment attached. Mira whispered, "Is this still karma?" But no voice answered. Only wind. That night she built a fire. Not for ritual. Not for warmth. Just because she could. Sometimes pause isn't stillness. It's space. To breathe. To re-enter. To be. She found a cabin near the edge of the woods. Abandoned but intact. She swept it out, fixed a hinge, lit candles. No electricity. No signal. But somehow, it felt connected. She wrote again, first in a journal, then on scattered scraps. Not memories. Possibilities. She imagined futures not yet real, people not yet met. One page simply read, "You don't owe the world your ruins." On another, "Start without waiting for permission." She taped them to the walls. A collage of intentions. Karma hadn't led her here to rest. It had offered her the chance to live without obligation. It felt foreign and sacred. One morning, footsteps approached. A young woman in a yellow jacket stood outside the cabin, soaked, breathless. "Are you Mira?" Mira hesitated. "I am." The woman exhaled. "I followed the symbols. They led me here." Mira opened the door. "You hungry?" No lectures. No tests. Just soup and space. That evening the woman said, "They said you help people rewrite." Mira stirred the pot. "I don't rewrite. I just remind them it's their pen." The woman looked down. "I thought karma meant punishment." Mira shook her head. "Karma means consequence. And consequence includes hope." The woman smiled for the first time. The light returned. Just a flicker. But enough. They stayed 3 days. No roles. No plans. Just presence. On the last night, the woman added her own words to the wall. "My silence doesn't make me weak." Mira watched her tape it gently. The woman asked, "How will I know when I'm ready to go?" Mira replied, "When staying feels like hiding." That morning, she left. Mira stood at the doorway, watching her disappear into fog. She felt no sadness, no fear, only trust that the woman would carry something forward, that the road would ripple with that choice. Karma's reach wasn't always in the return. Sometimes, it was in the departure. Mira cleaned the cabin, closed the shutters, left a note on the mantel. If you're reading this, welcome, you're not lost. Then she walked down to the bay, where the tide had changed. A small boat bobbed against the rocks, unmoored, waiting. She stepped in. No map, no route, just tide and instinct. She rowed with steady arms, the cabin shrinking behind her, not as a home lost, but as a lesson complete. The file in her pocket was lighter now. Few pages left, but the pen remained. Her story wasn't over. It was just refusing to rush. Karma hadn't rewritten her. It had reminded her how to write. Mira arrived in a town without urgency. She didn't ask its name. She simply walked its streets, quiet, cobbled, worn like an old book. A girl sat outside a bookstore, crying silent. Mira approached and sat beside her. No questions, just presence. After minutes, the girl said, "I don't know who I am anymore." Mira replied, "That's not the end of your story. That's the middle." The girl looked up, hopeful, but broken. "How does it end?" Mira said, "When you decide it does, not a second before." She handed her a blank page, folded in half. "Write the next line." The girl held it like something sacred, because it was. Choice always is. Mira spent the night above a library. Dust lined the shelves, but the silence was kind. She lit a candle and reread old journal pages, her own. They felt distant, but not foreign. Grief, guilt, ambition, and ache inked across every line. But the tone had changed. Not erased, integrated. Karma didn't punish her past. It offered her space to walk beside it. She pulled out a blank page, wrote slowly, "I exist. That is enough, but I can choose more." She closed the book, not because she was done, but because it was time to move. Again, she blew out the candle, smiled in the dark. No finality, just continuation. She walked to the train station that morning. No luggage, just a satchel and her breath. As she waited on the platform, a woman approached, familiar eyes, tense shoulders. "Are you the one they call the walker?" Mira didn't answer. The woman whispered, "I don't know how to start." Mira nodded toward the empty bench. "Sit first. Let your story catch up." The train rolled in. Mira didn't board. She stepped aside, offered her seat. The woman hesitated, then stepped on. Mira smiled. This was the work. This was the walk. Not to go everywhere, but to leave space behind that others could step into. Karma wasn't a loop. It was a relay. She wandered more slowly now. Towns passed like chapters. Faces like sentences. One day she found herself back where it started. Halden Tower. Different now. Empty. Wool. Shut down. A sign hung on the glass. Closed. Under reconstruction. Mira stared at her own reflection. Not glassy-eyed. Not erased. Whole. A passerby noticed her. "You used to work there?" Mira said, "No, I used to survive there." She walked away before more could be said. No bitterness. No triumph. Just truth. Karma had done its part. Now, it was her turn. And she would write the rest in present tense. Every step, a sentence. Every breath, earned. Mira stood in an open field at dusk, wind pulling softly at her coat. No signs. No script. No karma file in hand. She breathed in fully. Exhaled. A voice echoed, not from outside, but from within. "You are no longer being corrected. You are creating." She smiled, not because it was over, but because she had made peace with the perpetual. Life would still bruise, still ache, still unfold in chaos. But she had the pen now. She had the page. She turned toward the setting sun and walked forward, not redeemed, not returned, but redefined. Her name was Mira. She had been rewritten by choice.